The night air hung heavy with the scent of rain and lantern smoke as Aiko Hanami moved through the winding alleys of Edo. Each step was measured, her feet barely making a sound on the damp cobblestones. The city was alive with whispers, shadows shifting behind sliding doors and beneath eaves. But none were as dangerous as the ones she sought. Clad in a plain, muted kimono that bore no hint of the elegance beneath, Iko melted into the backdrop of the bustling streets, her keen eyes scanning every corner for signs of pursuit. For weeks, rumors had fluttered through the corridors of power secret meetings. Coded messages passed in hushed tones, and the gathering of those discontent with the shogunate's rule. Aiko knew that to expose the conspiracy threatening the fragile peace, she had to risk everything. Tonight was the night to confirm the whispers with her own ears. Her informants had spoken of a secluded tea-house on the outskirts of the city, a place where high-ranking officials gathered under the cloak of darkness. Drawing a deep breath, she approached the small wooden building, its paper lanterns casting a soft, flickering glow that barely penetrated the thick shadows. The faint murmur of voices drifted through the air, punctuated by the occasional clink of sake cups. Isio's heart hammered within her chest, but her face remained serene, practiced in the art of concealment. She slipped inside just as a group of men rose to greet one another, their faces obscured by the low light. Behind a partially opened sliding screen, Aiko crouched, her senses straining to catch every word. The conspirators spoke of plans to undermine the shogunate's authority, their voices cold and resolute. Names were whispered: Lord Matsuda, Nobuyuki among them, shadowy figure whose ambition threatened to plunge the empire into chaos. The weight of their treachery settled in Isio's stomach like a stone. But she steeled herself, knowing that this knowledge was a blade she wielded with care. Suddenly, the scrape of a sliding door startled her. A shadow crossed the threshold, and Iso's breath caught. She pressed herself flat against the floor, silent as the night itself. Footsteps grew louder, echoing in the cramped room. Someone was coming, perhaps alerted by a careless servant or a betrayed ally. Panic flickered, but she forced the calm back into her limbs. When the moment was right, Aiko slipped from her hiding place, her movements swift and fluid. She darted through the back door into the narrow alley, the cool night air biting at her face. Behind her, the shouts of pursuers shattered the silence, their anger rising like a tide. Aiko ran, heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration, her mind racing to find a route that would evade capture. The labyrinthine streets of Edo became both her refuge and her trap. She weaved through marketplaces and over bridges, the sounds of her pursuers growing faint but persistent. Finally, she slipped into the shadowed courtyard where Takeda Ryunosuke awaited, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. "You're late," Ryunosuke said quietly, concern tinging his voice. "I was nearly caught," Aiko admitted, handing him a folded paper damp with her sweat. "But I have what we need." A secret meeting, confirmed. The conspirators gather under Lord Matsuda's command. Ryunosuke's gaze hardened as he unfolded the note, eyes tracing the hastily scribbled details. "This changes everything," he murmured. "We must act swiftly." Aiko nodded, her breath still ragged but her resolve unbroken. "But now they know I'm watching. I'm a marked woman." Ryunosuke placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we protect you as fiercely as you've protected us. The path ahead is dangerous, but we walk it together." The night seemed to hold its breath as the two figures stood in the flickering lantern light, bound by a shared purpose that would test their courage and loyalty to the limits. In the depths of Edo's shadows, A gambit had been made, one that could bring down an empire or doom those who dared to defy its darkness. As dawn approached, the city stirred, unaware of the storm gathering beneath its surface. For Aiko, Hanami, and Takeda Ryunosuke, the game had truly begun. The air hung thick and heavy within the covert chamber, nestled deep beneath Edo's labyrinthine streets. Flickering lanterns cast long, dancing shadows across the faces of men who had long abandoned the pretense of honor for ambition masked as duty. Takeda Ryunosuke crouched silently behind a wooden partition, the coarse grain pressing against his forearms as he strained to catch every word murmured by the figures gathered before him. The room was dominated by a tall, imposing man cloaked in dark robes that seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki's presence was a force that demanded attention even without words. His gaze, cold and calculating, swept the council gathered in his confidence, each man hanging on his every syllable with a mixture of fear and reverence. "Japan stands at a precipice," Matsuda began, his voice low but resonant. "The shogunate's weakness invites chaos. We must seize this moment to reshape the future, to restore order through strength. Those who oppose us cling to outdated notions of loyalty and honor, blinding themselves to the greater good." Ryunosuke's jaw tightened. The words echoed the bitter truths he had grappled with, truths that gnawed at the edges of the samurai code he cherished. Yet there was something more chilling in Matsuda's tone, a ruthless conviction that justified any means to the end. Around the table sat men cloaked not only in shadows but in disgraced mercenaries, whose swords were for sale to the highest bidder, samurai whose loyalty had been shattered by broken promises and lost honor. Their eyes gleamed with a dangerous mixture of greed and desperation. From his hidden vantage point, Ryunosuke caught the name of Ishikawa Taro, Matsuda's enforcer, whispered with grudging respect by one of the mercenaries. This man was a spearhead of their dark intentions, a reminder that the enemy was not only in grand halls, but also stalking the streets with quiet menace. As the meeting drew to a close, Ryunosuke slipped back into the night, his mind racing. The weight of the conspiracy was heavier than he had imagined. Lord Matsuda's network spread like a malignant vine, tightening its grip on the shogunate's heart. Later, in the cold silence of a narrow alley, Ryunosuke confronted Ishikawa Taro. The official's sharp eyes gleamed under the faint glow of a distant lantern. His posture relaxed, but every muscle coiled like a serpent ready to strike. "You tread dangerous ground, Ryunosuke," Ishikawa said smoothly, his voice a whisper that carried the threat of steel. "There are those who would see you fall, forgotten like the ronin you are." Ryunosuke met the gaze unflinchingly. "I walk the path I choose. Your threats do not sway me." The tension between them was palpable, a silent dance of wills where one misstep could mean death. Ishikawa's lips curled into a faint sneer. "Honor is a luxury in times such as these. Remember that." That night, Ryunosuke returned to the modest quarters he shared with Kenta Moriyama. By the flickering candlelight, they spread out stolen documents and coded letters fragments pieced together from whispers and shadows. The sprawling reach of Matsuda's influence unfolded before them. Corrupt officials, bribed guards, mercenaries loyal only to coin. Kenta's broad hands trembled slightly as he traced the lines of ink. "This is worse than we feared." "Yes," Ryunosuke replied quietly, "but now we know the full scope. There is no turning back." The room seemed to close in around them, the weight of impending conflict pressing hard. Yet beneath the despair stirred a fierce flame of determination. Later, perched atop a quiet rooftop beneath a moonlit sky, Ryunosuke allowed himself a moment of solitude. The cool night air brushed past, carrying with it the distant sounds of a city unaware of the storm gathering beneath its surface. He pondered Lord Matsuda's cold rationality, the way the man had cast aside compassion and loyalty as obstacles to his vision. It was a mirror darkly reflecting Ryunosuke's own struggle to uphold honor in a world bent on betrayal. "What is the cost of justice?" he murmured to the night, "when the enemy wears honor as a mask of deceit?" His fingers brushed the worn hilt of his katana, a silent vow forming in his heart. The road ahead would be perilous, but surrender was not an option. For the fallen, for the betrayed, for the fragile peace of the shogunate, he would face the shadows head-on. As dawn's first light threatened the horizon, Ryunosuke rose, the weight of knowledge heavy but his resolve unbroken. The next steps would demand every ounce of his skill, every shred of his honor. The empire of shadows was vast, but so too was the heart of a samurai unwilling to yield. The air in the cramped back room of the tea-house was thick with the scent of steamed rice and lingering smoke from a dying candle. Shadows flickered across the wooden walls as Takeda Ryunosuke's sharp gaze fixed on Kenta Moriyama, whose broad frame seemed to take up every inch of the small space. The tension between them was palpable, a charged current that threatened to snap with even the slightest provocation. "You cannot charge in recklessly again, Kenta," Ryunosuke said, his voice low but firm, eyes narrowing. "If you expose us before the time is right, all our efforts will be for naught." Kenta's jaw clenched, a scar tracing a pale line from his temple down his cheek twitching with his anger. "And what good is waiting, Ryunosuke? We risk losing the advantage every moment we hesitate. I fight best on the front lines, not behind closed doors." Ryunosuke inhaled slowly, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on his shoulders. "The enemy is cunning, and our numbers few. Recklessness is a luxury we cannot afford. This is not just about battle, it is about survival, yours, mine, and all who stand with us." The room fell silent save for the faint crackle of the candle's flame. Kenta's eyes softened, the rawness of their shared history surfacing beneath his stubborn exterior. "You carry the burden of command well, Ryu. But sometimes I wonder if your honor blinds you to the harsher truths." Before Ryunosuke could respond, the sliding door opened quietly. Aiko Hanami stepped in, her slender form draped in a plain kimono that belied the sharpness of her mind. Her eyes, bright and unwavering, met Ryunosuke's. "I bring news. A secret meeting is scheduled for the night after next. The conspirators will gather at the northern warehouse district." Ryunosuke's heart quickened. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for, but it came with risks that made his jaw tighten. "We must prepare carefully," he said, turning to Kenta. "Your impulsiveness nearly cost us before. I need your strength, but also your restraint." Kenta nodded, a reluctant respect in his gaze. "I will follow your lead, Ryunosuke." Later that evening, beneath the pale glow of paper lanterns strung along Edo's narrow alleys, Iko moved like a shadow, her footsteps silent against the cobblestones. The city's nocturnal symphony, the distant clatter of wooden sandals, whispered conversations, and the occasional bark of a guard dog wove around her as she delivered her intelligence to Ryunosuke. Her role was perilous. One misstep could mean capture or death. Ryunosuke listened intently as she detailed the conspirators' plans, his mind racing to assess the best course of action. The weight of the samurai code pressed upon him, demanding honor even as the city teetered on the brink of chaos. Seeking counsel, Ryunosuke visited Elder Shogun the next day. The old samurai sat cross-legged beneath the soft light of a paper lantern, his eyes deep pools of experience. "Honor," Shogun began, is not always the sword struck in battle. Sometimes it is the patience to wait, the wisdom to choose the right moment. Remember the bamboo, Ryunoskuk. It bends with the wind, but does not break. Ryunoskuk absorbed the parable, the elder's words settling into his heart like seeds in fertile soil. He knew the path ahead would demand both strength and flexibility. That night, on a rooftop overlooking the sprawling cityscape, the trio gathered beneath a moon that bathed the world in silver light. The cool breeze carried the faint scent of cherry blossoms and the distant murmur of Edo's restless streets. Ryunosuke laid out the final plan, his voice steady as he detailed the roles each would play in the coming confrontation. "We stand on a knife's edge," he said. "One misstep and the shadows will consume us. But together we can turn the tide." Kenta's eyes burned with renewed determination, Ico's expression resolute. The balance between caution and courage was delicate, but their unity was unbreakable. As the night deepened, Ryunosuke felt the old turmoil within him settle into a focused resolve. The lines had been drawn. The battle for justice, honor, and survival was about to begin, and he would lead with every ounce of strength and wisdom he possessed. The city below whispered secrets in the dark, and Ryunosuke's hand tightened around the hilt of his katana. The dawn was coming, but the night still held many dangers. He would face them all, for the Empire of Shadows had not yet claimed him. And so, with the weight of his past and the hopes of the future pressing against him, Ryunosuke stepped forward, ready to carve his path through the encroaching darkness. The night in Edo was thick with an uneasy stillness, the kind that presses on the chest and tightens the grip of anticipation. Takeda Ryunosuke stood beneath the flickering light of a worn paper lantern, its glow casting elongated shadows across the damp stones of a narrow alleyway. Beside him, Kenta Moriyama's broad frame was taut with readiness, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The rain from earlier had left the air heavy and cool, scenting the city with the musk of wet earth and distant smoke. They waited for Aiko Hanami, their indispensable informant and ally, who had promised crucial information that could turn the tide in their perilous struggle against the conspirators threatening the shogunate. Ryunosuke's mind was a storm of thoughts, calculations, fears, and an unyielding sense of responsibility. The samurai code bound him to protect those who fought for justice alongside him. Yet tonight that code felt frail, as if the very trust he had placed in others might be his undoing. A faint rustling echoed from the shadows, and Ryunosuke's sharp eyes caught the delicate silhouette of Aiko emerging from the darkness. Her kimono, plain but elegant, brushed softly against her slender form as she stepped forward, her face set with a steely resolve that belied the danger surrounding them. Just as relief began to warm Ryunosuke's chest, a sudden clatter shattered the fragile quiet. From the depths of the alley, figures emerged, their movements swift and merciless. Ishikawa Taro, the corrupt government official and enforcer for Lord Matsuda Nobujuki, led a contingent of grim-faced men whose weapons gleamed coldly under the lantern's light. Before Ryunosuke could draw his sword, the trap snapped shut. Ico's startled gasp was cut short as strong hands seized her, dragging her backward with brutal efficiency. "No," Ryunosuke shouted, lunging forward, but Kenta grabbed his arm, holding him back. "We're outnumbered," Kenta growled, his eyes blazing with frustration and fury. "We must live to fight another day." But Ryunosuke's heart clenched with helpless rage. The betrayal was palpable. Someone within their circle had led Ishikawa's men to them. Trust, once a solid foundation, now crumbled beneath the weight of treachery. Later, in the dim solitude of a hidden chamber, Ryunosuke confronted the one he suspected most. The air between them was thick with accusation and disbelief. Faces shadowed, voices low but sharp. They exchanged words that cut deeper than any blade. "Why?" Ryunosuke demanded, his voice a mixture of hurt and anger. "Was our cause so meaningless that you would betray?" The betrayer's gaze faltered, a flicker of regret flashing briefly before stealing into cold resolve. "Survival demands sacrifice," came the whispered reply. "You would do the same if you wished to see the dawn." Ryunosuke's fists clenched, the bitter taste of betrayal burning in his mouth. Yet beneath the sorrow, a fierce determination ignited. The path ahead was darker than ever, but his resolve to rescue Aiko and expose the conspiracy only deepened. As the night waned, Ryunosuke found himself alone atop a rain-slicked rooftop, the sprawling city of Edo unfurling beneath him like a living tapestry of light and shadow. The soft patter of raindrops mingled with the distant murmur of the waking city. The weight of loss pressed down upon him, yet in the storm of his thoughts, a quiet clarity emerged. He was a solitary figure bound by the samurai code, yet now more than ever free to choose his own path amidst the empire of shadows. With the first pale light of dawn creeping over the horizon, Ryunosuke sheathed his sword and turned away from the cityscape. The battle was far from over, but his spirit remained unbroken. The fragile bonds of trust had been shattered, but from the shards a new resolve would arise, unyielding, relentless, and fiercely honorable. The fall of trust was a bitter wound, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of a deeper fight, one that would test every fiber of Ryunosuke's being. The shadows were closing in, but within the darkness, the flicker of hope endured a hope he would fight to protect, whatever the cost. The night hung thick over Edo, a heavy blanket of darkness pierced only by faint lanterns swaying gently in the cold breeze. Takeda Ryunosuke crouched low behind a stack of weathered crates, his sharp eyes scanning the warehouse before him. Beside him, Kenta Moriyama adjusted the grip on his katana, his breath steady despite the tension that coiled like a serpent inside his chest. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and rust, an oppressive stillness settling over the narrow street that seemed to hold its breath. "She's inside," Kenta whispered, his voice a low growl edged with urgency. "We don't have much time before the patrols change." Ryunosuke nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Aiko Hanami, the resourceful spy who had become their eyes and ears within Edo's elite, had been captured after the recent betrayal. Her disappearance was a wound that cut deep not only for her sake, but for the fragile web of trust they had painstakingly woven. Failure was not an option. The two Ronin moved with practiced stealth, shadows among shadows, as they approached the warehouse's side entrance. The heavy wooden door was barred and guarded, but Kenta's deft hands produced a small set of lockpicks, relics from their days as samurai turned outlaws. Moments stretched into eternity as delicate clicks echoed faintly in the night. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow corridor dimly lit by flickering lanterns. Inside, the scent of oil and sweat mingled with the metallic temps of sharpened blades. Ryunosuke signaled Kenta to proceed cautiously ahead, their footsteps muffled by tatami, mats worn thin by years of use. Each corner turned heightened the tension, every shadow a potential enemy, every whisper a threat. In a small, sparsely furnished room near the back of the warehouse, they found her. Aiko sat on the cold wooden floor, her wrists bound with coarse rope and bruises darkening the pale skin of her arms. Her dark eyes flickered with a mixture of relief and pain as Ryunosuke knelt beside her. "Ryunosuke," she breathed, voice hoarse. They're planning something worse more than we feared. You must hurry. Before he could respond, the muffled sound of footsteps approached from the corridor. Ryanosuke's hand slid to the hilt of his katana, eyes narrowing as Kenta crouched beside the door, ready to strike. The tension snapped like a drawn bowstring as the guards entered, unaware of the storm waiting in the shadows. The battle was swift and brutal. Steel clashed with steel, the sound muffled beneath the rafters but no less deadly. Kenta's broad shoulders bore down with ferocious strikes, while Ryanosuke's movements were precise and measured, each cut calculated to disable rather than kill where possible. The enemies fell back one by one, their surprise and underestimation of the Ronin proving fatal. With the guard subdued, Ryunosuke cut Iso's bindings, helping her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but her spirit remained unbroken. "We must leave now," he urged, glancing toward the windows where faint lantern lights suggested more foes were approaching. The narrow alleys of Edo became their refuge and their challenge. The city's maze-like streets twisted and turned, shadows playing tricks on weary eyes. Ryunosuke led the way, every sense alert to the faintest sound: footsteps, whispered voices, the clatter of armor. Kenta stayed close behind, a steadfast shield against any threat. As they slipped through the winding pathways, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon in shades of pale gold and crimson. Exhaustion tugged at their limbs, but the promise of survival and the fragile hope it carried drove them forward. In the quiet moments between breathless escapes and whispered plans, Ryanosuke's mind wrestled with the cost of their mission. The conspiracy they fought was no longer a distant shadow. It was a tangible menace tightening its grip with every heartbeat. Finally, reaching a secluded tea house known only to trusted allies, they paused. Aiko leaned heavily on Ryanosuke's shoulder, her eyes fierce despite the ordeal. "We have what we need," she said softly, "but they will come for us now." Ryanosuke's jaw tightened. "Then we prepare. We fight." The night's rescue had succeeded, but the war for Edo's soul was far from over. In the heart of the Empire of Shadows, honor demanded sacrifice, and the Ronin would answer its call as the darkness pressed ever closer. The distant crow of a rooster heralded the coming day, but for Ryunosuke, the dawn was merely the beginning of another perilous chapter. His resolve hardened like tempered steel, the tension within mirrored in the awakening city around him. The fight for justice would test every fiber of his being, and the shadows he navigated held many more secrets yet to be revealed. And so, with a final glance toward the rising sun, Ryunosuke stepped forward into the uncertain light, his sword ready, his heart resolute, and the fate of the shogunate resting on the edge of his blade. The narrow alleyways of Edo still Kenta's broad shoulders held the weight of alert to carry just Kenta Moriarty's carried sloughing self from frail despite the pounding latent streets. Memories clawed the limbs tails glowing, struggle of breath, tended to icy promises broke his fingers, and a flicker candle samurai shadows both the rescue had been a perilous gown like he withdrew a polished katana from the silence was heavy, punctuated over the city was off the string of the and the occasional gasp staring into the blade. He saw not just the man he was, but the man he was becoming. The lines of honor he had once drawn so sharply now blurred with the pragmatic need to survive and protect those he held dear. The rescue had been a victory, yes, but one shadowed by loss and sacrifice. The weight of command pressed heavily upon him, a constant reminder that every choice exacted a price. As dawn's first light crept through shoji screens, Elder Shogun arrived, his presence a balm to the troubled Ronin's soul. Beneath the blossoming cherry trees in the courtyard, where petals drifted like pale snowflakes, the elder's voice carried a quiet strength. "Ryunosuke-san, he began, his eyes steady and kind. The path of honor is not one of rigidity, but balance. You must learn when to bend, lest you break. The words resonated deeply, stirring a fragile hope amid the turmoil. The samurai code was not a chain, but a compass, guiding through the tempestuous seas of duty and desire. Ryunosuke absorbed the counsel, feeling the tension within him ease, if only slightly. Later, gathered around a low wooden table, Ryunosuke, Kenta, Iko, and Elder Shogun exchanged grave tidings. The conspiracy, far from unraveling, tightened its grip like a serpent coiling for the final strike. Each face bore the marks of weariness, dark shadows beneath eyes. Lines of worry etched in flesh, but also a fierce determination. The alliance forged in blood and shared purpose was fragile yet unyielding. Every step forward draws their eyes closer, Kenta murmured, his voice a gravelly reminder of the dangers ahead. Ryunosuke nodded, the weight of leadership settling firmly on his shoulders. We stand at the crossroads. Our honor demands action, but our survival depends on wisdom. Iko, her strength slowly returning, met his gaze with a fierce spark. We will see this through. For our fallen, for the future. The room seemed to hold its breath, the heavy silence between them filled with unspoken fears and resolute hope. Outside, the city stirred to life beneath a pale sky, the empire of shadows awaiting the dawn of reckoning. In the solitude of his chamber that night, Ryunosuke sat in quiet contemplation. The scars of the rescue, both visible and hidden, throbbed with the memories of sacrifice. His mind wrestled with the samurai code that had guided him since youth, its rigid demands clashing with the brutal realities of a world rife with treachery. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril, but his resolve burned undiminished. As the first light of morning crept over Eidos rooftops, Ryunosuke rose, steeling himself for the battles yet to come. The honor he bore was both his shield and his burden, a legacy of shadows and light intertwined. The empire trembled on the edge of upheaval, and he, a solitary ronin, was bound to its fate. The story of Takeda Ryunosuke was far from over. With each breath, each choice, he wove his own legend into the tapestry of a land where honor and betrayal danced in the flickering shadows. And as the dawn broke, so too did the promise of a new beginning born from sacrifice, tempered by reflection and driven by an unyielding heart.